It has been just about 4 months since the release of the Callisto Protocol, a game that saw mixed reception, a game that I think failed to live up to its expectations and the hype. And it's unfortunate because it was a brand new survival horror IP, and I think a lot of us were expecting that we were going to eat good. And while the game is serviceable, and I think that it is enjoyable, it is incredibly shallow. And a lot of the things that I liked about the game were more in the first half of it rather than the back half. And the fact that it's only 6 hours long made me feel that they might have missed the boat at Striking Distance Studios in trying to create a bigger, more fleshed out, more comprehensive game. Because what's here felt like a solid foundation, and then you just had this big exposition dump at the end, and the game was over, and it ended on a cliffhanger, which, by the way, I hate. I cannot stand it when games end on a cliffhanger, and then you know that there's a season pass, which there is, and that more than likely the real ending is hidden behind a paywall, and I think that's just a massive strike to this game. So with that being said, let's kind of talk about what's changed for the Callisto Protocol since launch, and the honest truth is, not much. There's been some really nice quality of life improvements, but for some reason, you still can't skip cutscenes on console. You can on PC, but for whatever reason, Striking Distance Studios wants you to watch everything. And some of the cutscenes are pretty cool, but if you're trying to do a speedrun or anything like that, it just completely deters you from wanting to play the game on console. The other quality of life improvements came to the weapon swapping. So I played this game on New Game Plus. That's all the footage you're seeing right now. I wanted to feel extra powerful, and I wanted to breeze through this game, and I didn't want to struggle too much when recording footage. But the big thing I noticed was, before in the original release, you literally took your sweet-ass time swapping weapons and taking your high-powered pistol and changing to your skunk gun, or swapping to your riot gun from your back to your... It was just all slow, and it really made encounters intense. However, they have drastically increased that speed, so you are absolutely more than capable of taking on mobs. And I appreciate it because when you got to the Arcus section, when you were fighting some of the blind biophage enemies, you would get swarmed pretty quickly. And because of that slow animation swapping, you would probably get killed. And it felt, I guess, a bit unfair. But honestly, in this game, you're going to want to one-on-one most enemies. So I understood why that slow swapping happened. But now that you can fast swap, you're kind of breezing right through enemy encounters. So I guess you can take the good with the bad with that. The other big quality of life improvement was healing. So healing in the original release was hilarious. You would literally pull out the healing stem, Jacob would get to one knee, and he would slowly press the needle into his neck, and it would slowly restore your health. That took forever, but it did make encounters very tense. And as I played it on standard and I played part of it on hardcore, I was like, this is really fun when I'm in these really big encounters. However, I can see a lot of players hating this and going, why the hell is this taking so long? It's just way too long. So the big update was they greatly enhanced the healing speed, which is appreciative, but it also makes a lot of these encounters way easier. So you kind of lose that tension there. So I guess there's the good and the bad. Beyond that, there hasn't been that many changes or updates. And honestly, the game is what it is. There's not much wiggle room to the Callisto Protocol. There's not much diversity. If you felt like the combat was repetitive, it still is. For whatever reason, they added more death animations, but that doesn't help you, especially in combat, right? Because you're doing the same thing. You're holding down the left thumbstick to dodge out of the way and then engaging in one-on-one combat. And then sometimes you'll have the ability to shoot at an enemy, as you're doing your melee, and that's kind of cool, but it's literally the same thing for the entirety of the game. And I felt like that was a really big missed opportunity, is that they could have somehow diversified combat just a little bit. They could have had like more finishers, something, but at its core, when you make a game that's a brawler, you kind of want a little bit of diversity in your moveset to make it feel like you're doing something else, to make it feel like you're just not just swinging wildly, getting blocked or parried because the enemies are going to block and parry you, you're going to want to have counters to that, and there isn't. So that was really frustrating because I feel like this is one of those games where it's a tale of two halves. The beginning of this game, I think, does a really good job of introducing you to all the mechanics. And the first 3 hours of this game, I felt like were the best 3 hours. You're trying to escape Black Iron. You're trying to figure out what's going on with Jacob. You're trying to find Elias. You're meeting Danny. All of this stuff is happening, and it's just so exciting and so cool. And you're just like, yes, this is what I wanted. I wanted this really gripping, beautiful, grotesque experience. But it wears off really quickly because you notice that, man, there's not a lot of diversity in the enemy design. And some enemies they introduce are only there for certain sections of the game, and then after that, they're gone. That's it. Unless you're the twin-headed biophage, which had an amazing introduction down in the Arcus mine, and you were just like, oh wow, this looks like it's going to be this really great boss fight. It was solid, it was grotesque, it was gruesome, it was violent. Good fight. And then, within like 45 minutes, you're fighting another one. Next 30 minutes, another one. About 15 minutes after that, another one. I just didn't understand why Striking Distance Studios didn't try to input more enemies. It's clear, based off the way this game looks. It's a AAA game. This game is gorgeous. This game has some of the best visuals I've seen recently, and I love the creature design. I just wanted more of it, and they just didn't do it for whatever reason. And that's a huge misstep. And here's the thing. You can update the game all you want to enhance combat and make things easier for the player and streamline things, right? I think that's fine. But your biggest failings are the fact that you just didn't do enough in terms of the actual game. In terms of enemy placement and the diversity within the enemies. Like, it's cool fighting the biophage the first time, and the first time they actually, their tentacles pop out of the chest and they have that really cool transformation. All of that is really cool. But the problem is that wears off very quickly, especially when you're down in the mines and you're fighting the blind biophage, and it's just like they just keep getting back up and they keep respawning and changing, and you're like, all right, I get it, there's got to be more to it. But after you get past that part, it's like, that's it. Say bye-bye to one of the more unique enemies in the game. They have one of the best introductions in the game. You're just pushing forward, and then when you get to the twin biophage, you're like, oh cool, boss fight, there's got to be more. There's not. There's really not. So you're like, the encounters just lacked impact. And that was frustrating because you could see the game's potential in front of you. You could see that this game wanted to be that cinematic horror experience. And unfortunately, it just kind of fell flat. And it fell flat because it really tried to rely on jump scares far too much. And I don't really understand that, because you would think that a game that emphasizes melee, meaning you have to get up and close with the biophage at all times, these enemies that could potentially kill you and maim you and rip you apart and all that stuff like that, that would be tense enough. However, they had so many scenes where an enemy just jumped out of a vent in front of you or to the side of you, behind you. You had those little weird tentacle pod monsters that jumped out and attacked you pretty much damn near at major points in the game that were just incredibly frustrating to deal with all the time. And then you had, and I swear, I hated this the most, when you opened up some of the chests and you had like one of the little biophage infected slugs jump at you. That was the single most annoying thing, because I remember when I first played the game and I was going and rushing toward the end, I remember like there were like 4 chests in a row that I opened that had a biophage parasite in it, and I was stunned that they just kept doing the same old shtick all over and over and over again. Like, we got it. We understood. Because when you first play this game, it's very tense. It makes you feel uncomfortable because of everything that's happening. But once you start to realize that like it's one-on-one combat and enemies will literally grab you from behind and pull you and try to fight you that way, and you have these different quick time events that you have to do, like, that kills the tension, a lot of it. And it was just a weird design choice, because I think if they stuck to melee and limited the weapons and made the monsters far more capable, and kind of diversified your moveset a little bit, I think it would have been better off. But instead, you're, shimmying through small areas so much and crawling through a number of vents, and you can see it coming. You can, by the time you reach the end of the game, you're like, that's a jump scare. That's a jump scare. Yeah, I get it. All right, cool. You just wanted some type of creativity. And I found that to be incredibly disappointing for me because, like I said, the first half of this game is so much fun. And you're just hoping that, like, as the game goes along and you progress, they're going to introduce new things. And it's going to get better and better until you get to the end. We have these, multi-fights or whatever, these crazy boss fights, and that doesn't happen. So that type of build-up and the lack of payoff is ultimately what kind of made the Callisto Protocol a disappointment for me, because my expectation was these are the creators of Dead Space. They know what sustained horror is, and they fail to do that in this game. It really feels like you could see it, like the way that the biophage look, the way they interact. It is amazing. It is one of the most, like I said, it's a visually stunning game. Grotesque monsters, realistic gore and violence, but it just lacks impact on all accounts. And I found that to be deflating, especially for me, because I was really hyped up for this game. And I was like, listen, I don't care what the critics say. I'm going to pick this game up, and then I'm going to be pleasantly surprised. I wasn't. And I played this game 4 months later, and I enjoy a number of the quality of life improvements. But, one of the weirdest things is that they still have not introduced a quick turn. And that should be required because Jacob gets surrounded really easy. So why the fuck wouldn't I want to turn around and be able to handle multiple enemies at the same time? Why do I need the enemy to turn me? That doesn't make any sense. That's just like another form of a jump scare. It felt lazy. It was weird and oddly frustrating. Here's the deal. There is DLC planned for the Callisto Protocol. Like I mentioned, it did end on a cliffhanger. So I assume that the upcoming DLC, and I guess it's going to be a campaign DLC, is going to be the end of the game. And I know that this game did not sell well. And I know that it costs, I think, $160 million to make. So let's say, for the sake of argument, that Striking Distance Studios is going to have this DLC cap off Jacob's experience and his part of the story. Completely fine with that. But there are things that they can do for the DLC that would completely elevate the base game. I don't want them to be separate experiences. I want it to be more streamlined, like you immediately follow up at the end and you keep moving. So let's think of the same idea of what Hitman 2 and 3 did for Hitman. So IO Studios took the enhancements from Hitman 2 and 3 and retroactively input them into Hitman 1, which was brilliant. And I think with the Callisto Protocol, if they do introduce this DLC soon, I think it would be kind of cool to take whatever enemies and new combat mechanics that they introduce and sprinkle it into the base game. So therefore, it enhances the experience for everyone. Because having like a permadeath mode, great. But that's not going to do much to bring back your audience. Because for the past 6 months, outside of the quality of life improvements and the introduction of a couple new modes that don't do anything for the game, you have no incentive to come back. So if this DLC is truly like a swan song for this game, for this IP, then go out with a bang. And I think that they have the potential to do so. I think that more than likely Striking Distance Studios sees that there were some major flaws in this game, things that were easily called out, and that no matter how much you optimize this game, what you have here in terms of mechanics, it's not going to help the actual experience at all. It really doesn't. So I think that would be in their best interest that when they push this DLC out, they go full throttle. Introduce crazy new bosses, introduce really cool mechanics, just make the game you envisioned, but don't try to push all your chips into being the cinematic horror experience. Try to be that survival horror game that IP that everyone thought this was going to be. Because when you look at the Callisto Protocol, you can see its potential. If you replay this game right now, or if you just want to watch this footage, like, look at the game. You're just like, wow, there's all these crazy, great environments. There are these great ideas. It's just everything is surface level. Now, combat encounters are pretty, they're basic, they're simple. There's not much diversity to that. There's no real puzzles to speak of. I don't think there was even a puzzle. Let me think. Nah, there's not. It's a straight action game. And that's fine. That is fine. But if you're going to like take certain things that made survival horror games great, the backtracking and stuff like that, and the different mysteries you have to solve, if you're going to take those away, you better be damn sure that your combat is locked in and that there's enough diversity to it that everyone is going to kind of sit there and go, yo, the Callisto Protocol, you know how it separates itself from all these other survival horror games? Brutal, visceral melee combat. Unique finishers. It's really intense. And for the first part of this game, when you're playing and you're starting to get acclimated to the mechanics, absolutely, it feels that way. But after a short while, you go, whew. And after they introduce guns, you're just like, okay. They work well together, but there are certain weapons that just make melee combat kind of an afterthought. Like, it's fun to do. It's fun. It's there, but there's not much depth to it. And once all of that nice gleam wears off and you can wipe that from your eyes, and then you see what the Callisto Protocol is, you're like, yeah, okay, that's, it's serviceable, but it should have been better. And I think if you enjoyed this game, that's great. I enjoyed the game too. But there's no way that people were satisfied with the finished product. I just can't believe it. Because I think that's what really kind of played into some of the review scores. It was like, that couldn't be it. And the fact that it finished on a cliffhanger, obviously, is like one of the, it's a cardinal sin. I keep saying that, but it's true. And I feel like this is a game that could really pick itself back up if it takes that DLC and then whatever they introduce there, they push it into the base game. There's got to be something. I'm hoping that it's not the end of the Callisto Protocol because it looks cool. It was obvious that this game is set up to be a franchise with multiple sequels. You can see it, especially when you get to the end, when you get to that rushed exposition dump with all of these things and information being thrown at you. Like, they try to do world building in 45 minutes. That works in certain movies. It's not going to work in a video game when you've had more than enough time to establish what the fuck is going on. They just didn't do it. I don't know why. I cannot explain it. So as it stands right now, is the Callisto Protocol worth getting? And I've had a couple friends of mine hit me up and say, look, man, the game looks really good. Correct. Absolutely 110%. The game is a really good looking game. However, I cannot recommend this game yet. It still feels like an unfinished product. And I would probably say when that DLC drops, whenever it is, and I'm hoping it's going to be soon. I hope it's this summer. And I hope that Striking Distance Studios absolutely nails it. I really want this game to meet its potential because there's still a chance. Thankfully, being in the era that we're in, games do have a chance to redeem themselves. And they can do it because they're able to make enough changes in DLC. So, who knows? Maybe when that DLC drops, the Callisto Protocol receives a bit of an overhaul in terms of its mechanics, and it helps greatly enhance the game and elevates it. Who knows? Maybe that'll happen. But as of right now, even after 4 months of patches and all these different changes, I just cannot recommend this game to anyone unless you're a diehard survival horror fan and you are okay with this 6-hour game with no replayability, because that's what it is. This is an incredibly short game. You have to go in with that mindset that there are some alternate paths, but that is it. They didn't make enough changes, in my opinion. They didn't expand your inventory slots. They didn't give you a quick turn. Console players can't skip cutscenes. So I think that with that in mind, even after 4 months of quality of life improvements and changes to this game, it is far more polished than it was when it released. I still can't recommend it at its price point, especially content-wise. But I will say that when that DLC drops, that's probably when I'll give it like a thumbs up and go, listen, we've had time. Now you get the full ending, all of that. I'm hoping it comes at a reduced price point, and I'm hoping Striking Distance Studios and the publisher Krafton understand that this game is more than likely going to be on its very last legs. This will be its very last chance to make an impression and to save the franchise, because if that DLC bombs, if they stay the course and keep the game as shallow and as surface level as the base game, I'm telling you right now, it will not sell well and it will not save this franchise. And that is a damn shame, because the Callisto Protocol has so much potential, and it is a game that I desperately want to see more of, because there's not much in the way of sci-fi horror games. The Callisto Protocol was supposed to be a spiritual successor competitor to Dead Space, and instead lives in its shadow. And that sucks. But it is what it is. Hopefully, the DLC, whenever it gets announced, whenever it gets released, corrects this. But I'm holding my breath. So that's going to do it for this video. Let me know in the comments what you think about the Callisto Protocol. Let me know in the comments what you want to see in the upcoming DLC when it eventually releases. And if you like the content, please like, share, and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. I'm Ken from Pixelated Thoughts, and I'll talk to you next time.